Hey everyone, welcome to Career Lab Podcast. This is the podcast where Master Career Counselor Julie LaCroix and myself, Joel Siegel, and I'm an executive coach and a business consultant, help people of all ages, all disciplines, and all uniqueness with their career problems and help them to get more on track and to find out what they need to do to achieve their career goals. Career Lab has evolved over the 6 seasons that we've been on the air. And now we also feature our special guests. And this has turned out to be probably the most important segment of our show, Julie and I. And by the way, good afternoon, my dear Julie.
Hi, Joel.
Julie is, not only a stupendously accurate and effective career counselor, but she's also beautiful, as you can see. So I'm happy to see you virtually, Julie. And as I was saying a moment ago, our special guests have become an important part of the show, an important segment. Today, we are going to focus on a special guest. And this is someone that Julie and I know well, a colleague of ours. His name is Greg Ward, and he focuses on respect in the workplace and diversity, equity, and inclusion, words which have become fairly loaded with a lot of meaning recently, So we thought, Julie and I, that it would be a wonderful time to have Greg on for him to talk about what he's doing. And I'm excited to have Julie and Greg and I all talk about this. So without further ado, if you're good, Julie, I'll bring Greg in and we'll get going.
Looking forward to it. Let's go.
Good. Let me see that beautiful smile. Wow. Okay. Well, Greg's going to join us here in a minute and we will get started. I'm very, very happy to have this guest on with us today.
Hey everybody, Julie LaCroix here from the Career Lab podcast. Just want to give a shout out to Douceur Global Education. Douceur.education is the website. If you're looking for an easy access, low price, online solution to getting an MBA, Douceur Global is your place to go. They offer amazing faculty, incredible speakers, customized education to your line of work. And do you need a bachelor's degree? You don't. If you have 5 years of management experience or equivalent, and you're looking to advance your career, maybe move out of a family business, move into a different company in your current industry where they're looking for some additional training, or you just want to be promoted and get some professional development, please reach out to Douceur Global. It's Douceur.education. They have the solution for you. It's a wonderful intersection between professional mobility and academic pathway, academic progression. Douceur Global Education.
And there he is. My
is.
colleague and friend, Mr. Greg Ward. Greg, thank you so much for agreeing to be our special guest on Career Lab podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Great to see you, Greg.
Good to see you, Julie.
How are you, Greg?
I'm dealing. I'm trying to keep the business afloat amidst all the chaos going on in the world, but I'm doing okay. And
Okay.
I've got my first TEDx talk coming up, so I'm really, really excited about that.
Tell us
Great.
about that, and we'll do a little prompt for that. I know you had one, and I was going to talk about another thing you're doing, but tell us about the TEDx talk.
The TEDx talk is for TEDx San Diego, which is one of the big granddaddies of all the TEDx's. I'm very fortunate to have been invited. I'm going to be talking about something very personal, something that happened to me when I was a very young man. And the title of the talk is called Confessions of an Accidental Killer, Turning Your Deepest Regrets into a Force for Good in the World. And the short story is, when I was a young man, I had a car accident and my girlfriend was killed, and it was my responsibility.
I know about that, yeah.
Yeah, something I've had to live with my whole life. And I really haven't spoken to anybody about it except for close colleagues like you.
Right.
And then not too long ago, I decided, I've learned a lot about this, and I believe I can help others if I bring my idea forth around something called moral injury. You're probably familiar with it.
Absolutely.
And what I've learned about it and what I learned about myself and how I can transform that regret into good. So I've decided to go public with it and talk about it in a TEDx talk. And that's happening in less than a week. I'm super excited.
Well, so are we. So
Wow.
and when I was your coach, obviously I knew about this incident that happened, and I didn't know what you were going to be speaking on in the TEDx talk, but I am struck by hearing that you are going to talk about this subject because knowing you and knowing about it, I think it's incredibly courageous of you to do that, and I think sets the stage for the kind of disclosure that may help others realize that they can at some point after reaching a level of insight and maturity, be able to talk about things that are very, very difficult, painful, and for which they bear responsibility. I mean, one of the things at a larger level in our society is that we don't have enough people taking responsibility for what they've done.
I agree.
We have people blaming others for everything and taking no responsibility. And if that becomes a part of the outcome of your TEDx talk, then bravo, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I felt it was time that I had matured enough, that I had understood it and myself enough that I could help. And so that's what it's all about. It's been a life dream to do a TEDx. I just didn't think that this is what it would be about. And
I
this
didn't
is
either.
what
I'm
yeah.
surprised, so happily surprised.
Thank
Julie,
you.
how do you feel about this?
Greg, I commend you. I really hope people come out of the woodworks and connect with you on things that they are harboring severe guilt for. That is a very heavy load to carry so far into your life without
It really
a socially acceptable outlet for expressing some of the gas and some of the pain and some of the regret and some of the dirt that you end up clouding. We all have things we feel remorseful about, small and large, but yours is certainly on the top end of the spectrum. I know that that is a topic that will resonate with a lot of people. I mean, even just thinking about what that must be like for you to harbor that level of guilt for that long, it kicks up a lot of memories of things that I have been involved in that I also regret. Not nearly your story.
Right. And that is the purpose.
Yes.
The focus of the talk is regret.
Yes.
And that we all have them. Now, as I say in the talk, accidentally killing someone is extreme, but none of us are immune to regret. We've all had some incident. We've done something unintentionally that harmed someone else that we wish we could take back and fix somehow.
Yeah.
And so what as they call it in TED, the idea worth sharing is that if you make the good that you try to do be about the person who is gone or that you harmed and not about assuaging your own guilt, then that is truly authentic and will make a powerful, positive difference in the world.
And a legacy for her.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
I wish you could come. There's still a couple of tickets left. So
maybe I'll fly out. That actually sounds quite interesting. I'll live stream it.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're live streaming it, but they are doing the full production values, 3 cameras, the whole thing. It's going to be quite a show. There's going to be 2 musicians, 9 speakers, and the San Diego Gay Men's Chorus is going to perform as well. It's a big deal. Big deal.
I'm sure that your particular segment will resonate. I mean, I think an interesting, and I'd like to hear from you afterwards if you have an opportunity.
Sure.
I think one interesting question would be, what is the response of? I mean, this is such a striking story, such a critically striking story. How much will it? I'm thinking of what will happen on your social media channels. What people will really do? Will they really react and react as Julie has, recognizing that we all have some things we are ashamed of and some things we have done wrong and made mistakes with, and coming clean with that and owning that and taking responsibility for that is a key thing. And I'll be real interested to see, so because you are well known, what the reaction's like, because we live in an environment when a lot of people do the opposite, and we're kind of shown by our models, our government models, to do the opposite.
Yes.
To never take responsibility for anything.
Yeah, I agree. And I believe that there are, the statistics are hard to pin down, but the estimate is that approximately 30,000 people in the U.S. accidentally kill someone every single year.
Wow.
And many more are seriously injured or permanently disabled because someone made an unintentional mistake. So I believe there are many, many people out there who will listen to my talk and, first of all, I believe, see themselves in me, and then be moved to consider how what they are doing, how they are managing their own guilt and regrets, can be transformative in a positive way rather than undermining and destructive of their lives and relationships, which many people, it's very sad. There's an organization called the Hyacinth Fellowship, which I attended their first annual in-person gathering in Detroit last fall. About 20 people, all of whom in one way or another had accidentally killed someone. And the thrust was, let's come together and figure out a way to cope and manage and move forward in a positive way. And so I'm hoping that people will understand why I've come forward, and not to just, do mea culpa and publicly lash myself, but rather to say there is a way forward. You don't have to be shut down for the rest of your life. You don't have to run away from what happened. You can face it, you can own it, you can transform it. And that's the essential message. I hope that's what they take away.
I hear a nonprofit possibility here. And, the more I think about that situation that you have come to be in, the more I realize that your situation is as old as time.
Yes. The name of the Hyacinth Fellowship is taken from the Greek god Apollo fell in love with a mortal named Hyacinth. And Hyacinth and Apollo were out throwing the discus one day, and Apollo, being a god, he threw it a little too hard, and Hyacinth tried to catch it and was knocked down and fatally injured. And Apollo tried to save Hyacinth with his magical godlike powers, but could not do it. And now Hyacinth's blood goes into the ground. And so Apollo declared that the flower that resulted from his blood will be called the hyacinth. And so it dates back to mythology, to the Greeks. In one way or another, this is time, civilization immemorial. It's happened to many. And,
again, creating a legacy for Hyacinth. I mean, it's just
yes.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
Greg, even though we're here to really talk about a couple of other topics, I feel like that in promoting today's episode, we will certainly focus on this, because this in itself, just this little segment, this little talk we've had, I think is pretty powerful. Julie, what do you think?
Thank you.
I wonder how this has been a piece of Greg that has affected Greg's career.
Completely, 100%. The accident happened when I was 18, and for many years I struggled with enormous guilt and shame, and you name it. And I also realized that somehow I needed good to come out of this, and I eventually tried to do that through my work as a theater artist and as a writer and as a leadership coach and so on. And what I came to understand is that for much of my life, even though I was doing good work and I was making a positive difference, it was mostly about convincing myself that I'm a good guy and convincing other people that I am worthy of their respect. It's only when I studied moral injury and realized that this kind of unconscious self-absolution was really inauthentic. That if I was able to focus on what would Michelle, that's her name, what would have Michelle contributed to the world if she had lived, or what would she have wanted me to do if she could have told me? And once I came to understand that, I actually founded a scholarship, an art scholarship in her name at our high school, and she wanted to be a professional artist, and she was a junior, and she was on her way. And I feel that that's exactly what she would have wanted me to do. And once I founded that scholarship, and of course, all of her friends, even her parents, contributed to that scholarship. And so every year it's given out to a young woman at our high school who is intending on being a professional artist. Once I made that shift, the burden of shame and guilt was lifted to the point where it was no longer, which it had been for decades, incapacitating. There were times where I was so overwhelmed and brought to my knees that I could barely function. And once I made that shift, the burden was lightened. I will always carry it. It's always there. But I feel now that I have something to offer to people who are in that situation or even close to it. It doesn't have to be accidentally killing somebody. So it's that realization. That's the idea that I'm trying to share.
And Greg, you deserve that healing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Greg, also just to say before we move on, everyone carries some shame and guilt for something they've done. It doesn't necessarily have to be as extreme as what happened to you, but it can be equally debilitating and devastating.
Yes.
I've made a couple of serious mistakes in my life. I'm sure Julie has.
Sure.
We've all made a couple of mistakes that we need to process and deal with. So I'm really grateful for this part of our podcast today.
Me too.
I'm surprised because I didn't know what you were going to say and what your TEDx talk is going to be about, but I'm sure it'll be really, really, really helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Well, Career Lab is a special environment, and you have really made it more special today. So let's move on. And I know our time is limited. We wanted to, as I mentioned to you in my email, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was you had made a post not long ago, on LinkedIn about DEI and the things that are going on. And because the Center for Respectful Leadership, which is your organization, and one you founded and one you are synonymous with, and one which focuses on respect and by next door focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion as a part of what respectful leadership is and respect in the workplace is.
Exactly.
I thought you might want to come on and share some of your thoughts on, what's happening currently, how you're dealing with this with your clients and the things you do, and have Julie and I react to it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm not sure where to begin. I can tell you that in talking with my clients, many of whom are heads of DE&I in giant corporations, they are a bit thunderstruck. They are a bit shocked by the rapidity in which the entire DEI movement, if you will, had the rug pulled out from underneath them. It's not that they didn't see it coming. I just don't think any of them thought it would be to this extreme.
So let me just jump in because this is actually, sorry to interrupt you, but this is a very key point that I wanted to talk about, and I'm really glad you brought it up. It seems like across the board at a corporate level that DEI programs have been abandoned. I mean,
Completely.
as you say, the rug is pulled out from under them. These are programs that in many cases were very well established, and with the exception of Costco and a couple other companies, the companies that had adopted leadership positions in this effort have suddenly completely turned their back on it. And and Julie and I wanted to hear from you about what you think of that.
Well, I think two things. I think those companies that did an about face and immediately 180 said, okay, no more DEI. I think in hindsight, they were just window dressing. It was just a DEI washing that they were doing on their corporate values. They really weren't committed. They really weren't walking their talk or talking their walk one way or the other. They weren't doing it. They were just, it was just for show. And the moment they got an opportunity or they got the threat of a lawsuit, which really was a kind of legalized extortion. It's basically there's a particular law group that is going around trying to get investors to raise an investor motion to get rid of a DEI programs in their company because if they don't, they'll be sued for discrimination. Well, they're only being sued for discrimination by the very group that's getting the investors to try to stop DE&I programs. And Costco saw through that game. And Costco actually, although I would love to have them as a client, they are not, but I've studied their culture for over 15 years. And they truly have an inclusive and respectful culture, one of the top. And essentially, they are smart enough to know that their customer base is extraordinarily diverse, not just race, not just gender, from nationality to religion, you name it, everybody goes to Costco. So to turn around and say, oh, we don't care about that stuff anymore, it would not only be an affront to their customers, but to their employees, again, who represent everyone in the world who works at Costco is extraordinarily diverse organization. So they very wisely said, no, we're not going to be extorted into dropping something that we believe is at the core of who we are as a company. And so it's heartening that there are big players out there with big wallets who are willing to pay big money to their attorneys to push back on this. Then the other big corporations that have dropped it immediately, they never really cared about it, and they're certainly not going to pay their attorneys to fight back. They just don't want to buck the trend. The other thing they're caving to, and you know what? I get this. I get why many of them are caving. Because Trump and the Department of Justice, his Department of Justice, are now threatening to sue companies, to investigate companies, and bring federal lawsuits against companies for reverse discrimination. That's the threat. Now, it will not stand constitutional muster. It just will not. That kind of threat will not stand. But it has an enormous chilling effect. So if you're the kind of company who's on the edge about DEI, you're always a little bit uncomfortable with it, this is the perfect opportunity to say, oh, look, the government is telling us we better not do this under threat of a government investigation. So we don't want to hurt our shareholders' investments, so we'll just pull out of that. Forgetting about...
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, forgetting about the impact on the employees.
Right. Let me jump in and ask you so our listeners have a better understanding of what you just said. What are the government, new Department of Justice threatening these companies with? A lawsuit about what? So-called reverse discrimination. The claim, and I wrote a very lengthy, rather unfortunately long article about what I call the myth of quotas. When people hear DEI, they automatically think quotas. If they don't know, they think hiring quotas in their heads. And because there was a period after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, all the way up to the Bakke decision in 1978, where companies were allowed to have affirmative action quotas. That was allowed. The idea was to hire people who are qualified, who have merit from underserved populations that had been excluded from the workplace, women, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community have been excluded from work environments for centuries. And so what the Civil Rights Act and the affirmative action movement was trying to do was level that field to bring more women and people of color into the workplace. And it was successful. The problem is it generated enormous resentment among white people who believed that somehow the black person who got that particular job that the white person had applied to only got the job because of the color of their skin, which is patent nonsense. But when you are constantly told that that's the truth and you feel aggrieved, well, then that's where your head goes. So people really narrowed down the whole idea of DEI into, it's all about quotas. It's all about giving women and people of color opportunities that they never should have had. And it's called white grievance. And so they played upon it. And now they come up with this concept called reverse discrimination. The Supreme Court made a decision about universities not being able to admit people based upon race, that could no longer be a criteria. Many universities have stopped doing that a long time ago. But now there was this chilling effect, and the Department of Justice says that we're going to investigate you. If we find anything that comes close to reverse discrimination, we are going to level fines. We're going to drag you into court. We're going to make your lives miserable. So they scared the heck out of people. But constitutional scholars will tell you that it's a First Amendment right. Joel,
Julie, you have a First Amendment right to install a DEI program in your companies. You absolutely have that right. If you believe DEI is good for your company, you have the right to do that, and no government body or Department of Justice can tell you you can't do it. That's your First Amendment right. But just by even threatening this, they created a chilling effect. And that's why so many companies have run away from it.
Okay, well, I'm really, really glad you explained that to our audience, because that was one of my points in having you on today, was to try to get some clarity, at least on what is going on informationally. And I think you did a great job of that. I have another question before I ask it. Julie, I'd like to have you, weigh in on whatever you're thinking.
I'm fascinated because this is such an insider's view. So, you hear a lot about what's happening, on the news and social media and, cocktail parties, backyard barbecues. And then, of course, I work with clients all over the country all day long. So I hear little tidbits of what I call raw data. And I prefer raw data to, data that has been opinionated. So I very much appreciate these insights. It sounds like you're talking directly about not just like not legislation necessarily, but new goals with this administration, but what it really feels like to be inside the company. I had the very good fortune of attending the Anita Borg conference last October. And that was a women in tech conference focused on LGBTQ community. And every employer, it was like the Disneyland of the American economy in there. It was really wonderful. It was almost like watching my job kind of come to life, because I help people get jobs in every single one of those companies that
Very cool.
that had a booth. They had the entire Orlando Convention Center, the entire thing, 19,000 square feet, breakout rooms, podcasts, shows. Every vendor was there. Disneyland, Bloomberg, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, everybody, Tesla, everybody was there. National Geographic, and every booth was full of a hiring manager, and all the attendees were young women from the LGBTQ community who were pursuing jobs in tech, and the whole thing was a 5-day hiring party.
Wow.
And
Wow.
the head, the DEI, I'm sorry, Anita B had just hired the head of DEI from Uber, who is a leader in DE&I programs in corporate America, and I think was a bit of a controversial figure at Uber, if I remember correctly, but not controversial for Anita B, and a really interesting hire, because she was very, very assertive in her opinions about DE&I programs. And that really resonated with that segment of corporate America that was represented as vendors at that show. So I almost feel like we need to have another episode and maybe bring in somebody from Anita B to collaborate with Greg on not just what he's seeing, but what they're seeing at large, because that organization is massive. It's federally funded. It's a huge nonprofit. It's funded by every Fortune 500 practically in the country, and they are 100% focused on providing not just this huge career fair every year, but consulting and awareness for the relevance of diversity. And I talked to a lot of the conference attendees. I pulled them aside, and I would find the ones who looked a little different. They might have had pink hair, but they were like the smartest girl in the room. And I tried to really get human with people and get some insights about what it's like to work in a corporate setting as a member of the LGBTQ community. And almost every single person I spoke with said, it's no different than anything else. We have amazing programs that provide safe communities and work groups for us if we want them. We don't have to use them. And there was such a universal resonance of non-discrimination within the workplace. I was so happy to hear that. So I'm just hoping that whatever changes are happening or shifts are happening, and I try not to get political because again, I can't stand politics. I just hope that feeling of non-discrimination within the workplace is something that the companies care about carrying through into their culture.
Okay,
Well,
well,
that's a very good point.
go ahead, Ray.
Joel. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I wanted to piggyback on something you said, and you made excellent points. I have found in my work that women and people of color who have been at one point in their careers discriminated against in one way or another, when they move into a position of power and authority, are hyper aware of being non-discriminatory, go out of their way to recognize unconscious bias and do whatever they can to hire based on merit. So there's this idea out there that if you hire a woman or a person of color, you're not hiring someone based on merit. You're only hiring them because they're a woman or person of color. That is patent nonsense. And so, unfortunately, the diversity as a concept has been narrowed down in so many people's minds to just being about race and gender and sexual orientation. That's it. And the reality is, in most companies, if you've got the knowledge and you've got the experience and you've got the talents and skills and you treat people with respect, it doesn't matter, male, female, what gender, race, none of that matters when it comes to doing the work. What matters is your knowledge, your experience, your perspective, your ideas, your ability to create psychological safety within the team so that we can all argue if we need to be without squaring off against each other. So people have lost the essential goodness of valuing diversity. And if you just look outside your window, nature is filled with diversity. Nature wouldn't exist without diversity. It's insane how we human beings have want to categorize everything. And so now all of a sudden diversity is bad. It's just universally bad. That's just a fundamentally crazy way to think about it. And
I
so
feel like,
now
I feel like our society goes, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back sometimes, or vice versa, because everything you're talking about, kind of the big dream, is exactly what New York was like for me in the 90s. I worked in New York in the go-go 90s. Nobody cared if you were pink, blue, green, freckled, orange, nobody cared. Did you do what the last thing that came out of your mouth said? That's what New York was like back there and back then. And it was so, I think, heavily populated and such a density of diversity in a small geographic area that respect was the only language.
Right.
And I think that it really depends, for my opinion, it depends on the populace. I've relocated at this chapter in my life to a more remote area. There's just not a lot of diversity here.
Well, in terms of race and gender, is that what you're saying, or in terms of race?
There's a little, I mean, there's more than you would think, just because America has become more diverse. But in general, it's a little more remote out here.
Right.
But if you take that to the extreme on the other end and think about heavily populated areas like, Laguna Beach, where hundreds of people are on the sidewalks every day.
Yes.
You can't avoid diversity. New York City, hundreds of people used to be on the sidewalks every day. Chicago, Philly, and then you compare that to a nice little town in anywhere USA, in Nebraska or Minnesota or even here in Arizona, and people don't feel safe outside of what they know. And I think a lot of it has to do with population density. That's always been my theory. It shouldn't have anything to do with politics and policy. It should be something that we learn through life exposure and tolerate some people having more tolerance for it than others based on
I
their
hear you.
experiences.
I hear you. And we have become bombarded with messaging through social media that we are being invaded. You have to, you cannot, Julie, I respect you enormously. You cannot separate the politics of what happened here. It began with Ronald Reagan when he did away with the Fairness Act. And if you remember, the Fairness Act basically said it was very simple. If you were a media, if you were a licensed broadcaster or a publisher of news, you had to provide both sides of the argument. You had to be fair.
He also did away with federally mandated career counseling. Side note, everybody. Go on.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, well,
Wow.
you two, let me jump in because you two have, I think, contributed a lot of what I would call.
Which allowed Clinton to come in and provide the college funding for everybody, because the Reagan years minimized the trade school, and it eliminated the training for that, the vocational training. And then Clinton was able to really expand access to college, which then birthed this whole diversity thing, because it allowed for a whole new group of entrants into the college setting. And then now our economy is a little bit tilted toward college educated versus trade educated.
Yes.
So we have a little, we're still a little bit, we've kind of skewed this way and that way. And these are, systemic issues that will resolve over time. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow. So that's my little pulpit for today for career counseling.
Well, no, I'm glad that you both have a pulpit, because you both have extraordinarily competent, well thought out, and I think insightful things to say. We're just about out of time, but Greg, I did have a question for you. One more that I think is more directly related to what you do, and just wanted to hear you talk about it for a moment. I've been thinking a lot about what you do and thinking about these problems before your appearance today to kind of prepare my thinking. And one thing that kept coming up for me is, doesn't the current environment about DEI, the environment we're living in now, all the things that are happening, doesn't that create a lack of respect in the workplace on its face? And aren't the implications of that pretty stark? Because that's what you do. You preach respectful leadership and respect in the workplace. I've heard and seen you talk so many times, so eloquently about this, but it seems like the very fact that the DEI movement is under assault frontally and formally impacts the way people think about respect in the workplace. I've seen you talk about the resolution of conflict in the workplace where people don't really respect, and how if there was greater respect, even if the opinions continue to be diverse and divergent, there could be resolution. So I'm wondering how you feel about that, since that's what you do.
Well, you couldn't be more right. What we're seeing, our research is indicating that the number of what we call public disrespectful incidents in customer-facing entities such as essential workers in grocery stores during the pandemic, healthcare, the amount of disrespect, and this is backed up by the data from Georgetown University, the amount of disrespect that those workers have received during and since the pandemic has exploded. And so what happens is it's kind of a wearing down of general decorum and decency, what we call regular respect, good morning, how are you, caring and compassion. So in the public sphere, that has ballooned and exploded. And it is, and this is my word deliberately chosen, bleeding over into our workplaces. So we're seeing more and more interpersonal conflict, lack of respect, power differentials much more pronounced within the workplace. Do you remember the idea we were all going to be flat organizations? And Zappos, the shoe company, had only 3 levels in the whole company, something like that. Well, that's going away, because that required people to respect each other at every level. And so now what we're seeing in our workplaces is, first of all, people are not using the language of DE&I anymore. They're literally, I have 2 large global clients who literally have issued a list. You will not say those words. You will not. And also, there's a fear in the government about what's called code speak. Any words that might remotely relate to DEI, you cannot say those either. And in some agencies, they're taking that to include respect. So, how it affects me is it makes me very frightened that people no longer respect respect. And what we've come to is whoever's got power is going to wield that power however they can. And if you don't like it, oh, well, too bad, get over it. And that was the model for centuries. It's just the Industrial Revolution. Hey, I'm the foreman. You do as I say. If you don't like it, get out. There's somebody else who wants the job. So we're in that kind of world again where people are more fearful. And respect is hard to find. But unless you have a leadership like Costco does that are committed to it and they walk their talk every day. I do have one client who I just got off the phone with him yesterday. He's the head of DE&I in a very large nonprofit in the Midwest. And I won't tell you who it is. He says, I am sticking to my guns and our CEO is right behind me. And we are full bore ahead because 60% of our employees are women or people of color. So by golly, if we just said, okay, no more DEI, our employees would just freak out and run for the hills because we are a safe place for them. So it's an interesting reaction that we're seeing. At the end of the day, the good news is for me is I believe that most people still do respect. And once they understand how it functions in the workplace, are craving it. And that's what I'm hoping to do is be able to pivot and be that support for people all over the world that respect still does matter.
Okay, well, let Julie and I ask you a question then. How are you doing? How's your health, Greg?
I've lost some weight. I feel great. Thank you for asking.
Well, the reason
I'm in good shape.
I asked for a particular reason. I asked about your health because you've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
Over this next period of time, you are carrying the torch for a very important concept of respect in the workplace. Julie and I
Thanks.
function, our podcast is all about the workplace and what happens and how people get in there and all the things that happen to people transitionally and in their career progressions. And obviously, you being a spokesperson, one of the primary spokespersons for respect in the workplace. Very specific concept. I'm hoping that you're healthy and I'm hoping that you
Thank you.
stay healthy and stay well and, continue to do the great work you've done. Listen, we've got to wrap up, but I want to at a very personal level, thank you not only for coming on, but sharing what you shared about your TEDx talk as well as the other content, because we promote our podcast. We put it out to people. They hear it. They understand what's going on. And I really believe that when people hear a show like this, if they really listen, it will affect them. And if they really think about what Julie has said and what you've said today, it will matter and it will make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care. We'll see you soon.
Take
Bye,
care.
Greg.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Julie.
Bye-bye, Greg.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, this is the portion of the show where we usually wrap up, and that's exactly what we're going to do because we've had a very long and appealing conversation with Greg. Will you want to share your takeaways if there are any, Julie?
I think it's a similar takeaway to another episode we did about a year ago.
We've done everything and we've had everybody, so it's got to be similar.
We have not done everything. We think we have, but there's always a next client. But in being a mother, one of the responsibilities, or a parent, is to teach respect, to teach our children what respect is. And I think it's a lot easier to be respected than to respect somebody. It's very easy to feel respected. It's very hard to know how to respect somebody. And I just hope that humanity kicks in at every time in the future when there are workplace interactions and diversity is involved. I hope people continue to evolve to become more and more respectful, just as humans.
What a wonderful takeaway from Greg's segment, and knowing you as intimately as I do, I know you truly feel that way, and I'm real happy that our listeners could hear you say that. My takeaway, I guess, would be that, quoting an old song, I don't really know what song, and it wouldn't be important for me to remember the exact name of the song, but that quote is that the darkest hour is just before the dawn. And
Yeah.
so I think what we're going through now, when you live as long as I've lived, I know I only look 30, but I'm a little older than that. So when you've gone through as much as I've gone through and lived as long, you see that these movements are cyclical and nothing stays the same and nothing lasts forever. And even though we're in a particularly troubling period around the topic of today's podcast, I think we will see things get better eventually at some point.
I think there, as long as, like Michael Jackson said, look in the mirror, start with the man in the mirror. And I think if all of our listeners and you and me and the people we influence in our daily lives are modeled by us doing our best to be our best to others, of all others, then I think it's a butterfly effect. I really do. Call me Pollyannish, but hope springs eternal. And at the end of the day, I know that the American journey has evolved for the better. I know it has. In my lifetime, I've seen it. We still have problems. We always will, but we're getting generally better. We are.
Well, one thing you just said, and we'll wrap up the show because no one can say it better than you, America's career counselor. But you did say this a minute ago, or you alluded to it, and I think it's really the key point. It starts and ends with all of us, not with somebody else, not with some other state, not with some other party, not with some other Congress. It starts and ends
not
with
corporate
all of
policy.
us, right? Right. It starts and ends with us. And the way you phrased it a moment ago, that if we all look in the mirror and begin to do that ourselves, then the world will be a better place. No question about that.
And the workplace.
And the workplace.
Which
Okay.
is my world.
That's right. And mine too. So, well, we have to wrap for this episode of Career Lab. We'll be back next month with another episode. We look forward to seeing you. Remember that Career Lab is available on Apple Podcasts and other podcast outlets. And we have a 6-year history with our show.
Yeah.
We have a lot of really special guests. And before the shows, I tend to go back and listen to some of the other ones, the older ones, to see what we've talked about. And I'm impressed, not so much by us, but I'm always impressed by you, Julie, but I'm impressed by some of the wisdom that has been imparted by our guests. So take a listen, like us, please, and listen to us, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.